Arshia, tell us, who is Arshia Malik?
Arsha Malik is an Indian woman who happens to be from a Muslim heritage. She's a heretic, not just religious wise, but otherwise in life also. She's somebody who lives life on her own terms and thinker, constantly rebellious and questioning. Questioning. I'll always be questioning. But I'm proud of my Indian heritage.
I want to know, what is an Indian Muslim and what is the status of Indian Muslims in India as of today?
In today's time, it's obvious that an Indian Muslim is somebody who accepts his or her cultural heritage, that the past civilization of India, even if they've been converts or anything, you have to accept your ancestors were indigenous people and that there is a certain heritage that we've inherited and we need to protect that. So I feel today Indian Muslims, I have found that in Indian Muslims. I mean, it's a proud moment for me to say that none of the Indian Muslims ran for jihad in Kashmir. So that's something I proudly announce because they have a very good sense of the country. ये देश हमारा है एंड इसको मिलके बनाया है हमने, इसको आगे जाके मिलके बनाना है एंड इंडियन मुस्लिम्स का भी स्टेक है इसमें और वो कर रहे हैं. मैंने बहुत पहले एक ब्लॉग एंट्री लिखी थी टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया के लिए, द राइज ऑफ द कल्चरल मुस्लिम्स, और आज भी वो सच है. हर तरह के मुस्लिम्स ज्वाइन कर रहे हैं. दे आर ज्वाइनिंग द IAS, दे ज्वाइनिंग द एयरफोर्स, दे ज्वाइनिंग द नेवी, द आर्मी, डॉक्टर्स, इंजीनियर्स, टीचर्स एंड हर इसमें. हाँ, ये है कि मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया उस पर फोकस नहीं करती है, आपको सिर्फ नेगेटिविटी मिलती है. ये भी सच है कि कुछ मुस्लिम्स टारगेट हुए हैं ड्यू टू सम सॉर्ट ऑफ आई वुड से इमेच्योर mentality, what you call Muslim phobia. लेकिन as I've been writing कि Hindu extremism is a reaction to Muslim extremism. तो वे जो नए मिलेनियल के मुस्लिम्स हैं, दे रियलाइज कि उनको पहले अपना घर साफ करना है. दे हैव टू रियली clean their house and reform करना पड़ेगा. And that's what I mean by reform in Islam. Political Islam has to be tamed. Radical Islam को हटाना है and जो basic core message थी Islam की when it was born, the Sufistic message or the peaceful message, जो बाद में मुलाओं ने ossify कर दी, harden कर दी, उस पे वापस जाना है. And that's what an Indian Muslim is. He or she recognizes that India is their civilizational root, and they have to accept that heritage, and they have to work for the country.
There's also a projection that Indian Muslim is the persecuted Muslim under the current government or has been persecuted even in the previous governments. If you remember, there was a Sachar Commission report which basically projected Indian Muslim as the oppressed Muslim. Do you agree with that projection that Indian Muslim is really oppressed?
I don't agree with that because, as I said, don't go by the mainstream media. I teach, ST and SCs, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, and even the elite class. There's a mixture of kids in my class, and I have over the period of years, you start studying the parents and their, ideology and what is it that they believe in. So most of the Muslim families are really not into education as much. I mean, you can't blame the government for them not thinking they need to educate the children. Also, they're under the grip of the politicians and, as I said, the mullahs. So if you have this whole theology, if you have this whole philosophy ki this life doesn't matter, it's the akhirat, the afterlife that matters. So for those parents, becoming a doctor for their children, an engineer, itna investment karna is not necessary. This is what I've found in Muslim families mostly. So, but then again, you try your best, and there are other. I've seen Hindu families, helping up the Muslim families in understanding how much education is needed, and I haven't seen discrimination in regular life, in day-to-day life. People live together, they celebrate Holi together, they celebrate Eid together, and pata nahi kyun, but then mainstream mein negative sells. If there is a news that everything is fine in this mohalla, it won't sell. So, and then you have this projection of persecuted Muslims going into living rooms across the country, so you feel that there is this siege on the Muslims and all. uh, it's theology. The Muslim theology is problematic in the sense that they have to hold themselves as citizens first of the country. They cannot say that we'll have our own Sharia laws here, and they will also have to respect the sentiments of the majority. Like they expect their sentiments to be respected in their own majority Muslim countries. So if you're living in the land, you'll have to respect the law of the land. Of course, negotiations can be done across fault lines. India has its fault lines, and that is not going to be easily solved. Like in the Indian Muslim today can proudly say, this is my country. I have a stake in it. You don't have any right to tell me to, go somewhere, and I'm going to fight for it. But at the same time, I'm also going to, sweep away the radical elements from my own religion. जिसकी वजह से majority में resentment है, and that Hindu extremism has developed.
Since you come from the Muslim majority region of Kashmir, which witnessed conflict and violence in the last 30 years, there is a certain section in Kashmir which supported the idea of Pakistan, which also supported the idea of freedom from India, or so to say, Hindu India. And yet you are one among those in Kashmir who've been proudly and openly calling yourself an Indian Muslim.
It's not just me. In Kashmir, there's a silent majority that I keep saying who are pro-India. See, Kashmiris are very simple people actually. It goes from the times of the British. I mean, it's been mentioned in books. It's an insulated region, surrounded by mountains. So, narrative जिसके हाथ में था वो जीत गया. And unfortunately, narrative जो 70s 80s में आया वो जमात इस्लामी का आया. And it won the war, kind of. So what you saw in 1990 was these simple sheeple being told that they're oppressed and occupied, and they need to either have a merger with Pakistan or independence. Eventually, when we grew up and started questioning the very people who wanted this plan for us, the minions of the Hurriyat and all, we saw there was no plan. It was just random, and for them it was once we have Azadi, we'll discuss all those things. You ask them practical questions about the geography and how you're connected with the Indian mainland, and Pakistan and China is going to come in and then usurp you. How do you feel the occupation is going to end? They don't have any answers for that. Practically, there are no answers for that. But over the years, the silent majority has been getting clear about their stance, where they stand and where their future lies. Unfortunately, because the conflict is still there, it's not safe to say it out loud. I have been loud because I am me, and I hope that some other people take some courage and strength from me to say it out. But there is a silent majority. There is a silent majority very pro-India, and they're just about discovering their civilizational roots too. Because as I told you, it was all about the narrative. Who had the narrative? India seemed to be sleeping during the 70s and 80s when the Jamaat Islami, built up this whole merger with Pakistan and independence from India. There is an instrument of accession. That's what we researched, and properly UN resolutions. Again, the first one is obligatory for Pakistan. Unless you do the first, the 2 and 3 are not going to be, and it's not mandatory on India. So all these little things, who control the narrative? So far, the narrative was being controlled by Intifada Factory.
But you've
and
been
I
also
broke that narrative.
you've been also saying that you are somebody who is aware of your civilizational roots, your Indian identity, and you just happen to be from Kashmir. What do you mean by that?
Kashmir is a very close-knit society. It's a very close-knit tribal society. Everything is on ke wo kya sochega and ye kya sochega, because we are social people. Nobody likes to be ostracized. So if you have somebody accepting the fact that their ancestors must once have been Brahmins or once Hindus, it's almost exile from the neighborhood. So that's how the Kashmiris have survived over the years, amidst all these invasions and the brutal Afghan rule and all. It's documented, the Kashmiri will say anything to survive. So, as I said, they are discovering it, and the youngsters, the young generation, they are questioning why two generations of us are lying 6 feet under. And then they see the leaders over there, and then they ask questions, how is it that none of the leaders sacrificed? Where are their sacrifices, because they read about the Indian freedom struggle too, and there's no comparison at all with what has been called as the freedom struggle of Kashmir. Because the leaders, they have built palatial mansions, and all their sons and daughters are studying abroad. And whereas, the middle class and the lower class, two generations of my state are lying buried. So these questions were bound to come, and then they start thinking maybe there's something to it. Of course, the Kashmiri Pandit thing, the vacuum is a big thing in it. They've started hearing from us who witnessed it when we tell the younger generation that there were Pandits, and we were living together, we were neighbors, and they want to find out, did our neighbors, our parents, were they involved in throwing them out? So these critical questions, I've been doing that. I faced a lot of problems also in Kashmir, but I have this sense of rootedness, and their sense of rootedness was confused. I mean, the narrative.
Where did your sense of rootedness come from?
My formative years was spent in Delhi, and I've said that time and again, my life is an open book. I've grown up in cosmopolitan settings. Kashmir House, my dad was the manager there, and I had all these Bihar Bhavans and Maharashtra Bhavan, and my batchmates had Tibetans and Jains and Sikhs and Catholic Christians. And my dad was involved in delegations going to the Ashok Hotel and all. So, the American Embassy, the Vatican Embassy, Pakistan Embassy. So I would have dinner with the officials there. I've seen life closely, and believe me, be it any family from anywhere, the basic concern is the children and how good an education they can give to them. How much a child can grow up in a loving and peaceful environment. I mean, it's across that's what we call peace. So later my dad was posted to Amritsar, and I saw conflict there as well, and I started teaching the orphans of the police personnel and the militants who had been killed. And for me, again, the same thing, there is a place for everyone in India. It's just these fault lines which are exploited usually by a foreign power. So बहुत ही कम उम्र में I understood geopolitics, and that's how I have this rootedness in my civilization.
Now to this question that you've been calling yourself an Indian Muslim reformist. What do you mean by that, and why do you think Indian Muslims or Indian Muslim community needs reform? What exactly does this reform entail?
I think the first problem was the constitution giving these personal laws to the Muslim community. Secondly, Islam has always needed reform. If you check the history of Islam, regressive practices which over a course of centuries should have gone away have not. I mean, if you take other Abrahamic religions like Judaism and Christianity, they have evolved. But Islam hasn't. I mean, stone pelting, you want to stone for adultery, get stoned, and female genital mutilation, and this concept about the burqa and the hijab. These are regressive practices, and they haven't gone away. Now, being in India, Islam is best saved, the best, this is my opinion, that Islam was best preserved in India, because they had this whole Hindu majority and other cultures, Sikhs and Jains, to mingle with. So the basic message which the Sufi order, there's this homogeneity of Islam in India, which percolated down to Kashmir as well. So before the 90s, Islam in Kashmir was very liberal, and I have grown up there, and nobody had these issues about the hijab. Nobody had these issues about forceful, Ramzan, or it was a very free state. But then, in Islam, you had this concept of four wives. My grandfathers, they have had three wives. But eventually, I saw the evolution in my family. My mother, of course, she married my father, and the age started growing. I got married at 26. तो ऐसे ऐसे करके evolution होता जा रहा था. But unfortunately, एक stop आ गया because of the eruption of the Pakistan agenda in the valley. India may, I think it's been the petrodollars. We all know that. Saudi functioned, Saudi sponsored radical Islam being imported here, being Zakir Naik and the Deobandis getting very rigid and all. So reform was always needed. If you read Hamid Alwai, he was already, standing up for triple talaq in the 70s. So it's not something new. The only thing is that 21st century may a woman shouldn't be forced to wear a burqa. It should be her choice, but that choice would usually come as an adult if she would be influenced and inspired by the message of Islam. It's basically that. I mean, 30s, 40s में अगर वो कर लेते हैं तो सेंस बनता है क्योंकि वो स्पिरिचुअली इंस्पायर हो सकते हैं. लेकिन आप छोटे बच्चों को जो 6 साल के हैं, 7 साल के हैं, आप उनको कंडीशनिंग करते हैं हिजाब की, एंड देन दे ग्रो अप एंड से कि इट्स अ टूल ऑफ एम्पावरमेंट. आई एम नॉट गोइंग टू स्टैंड फॉर दैट. I've always been for choice. Because क्या होता है फिर इन रिवर्स में वो जो कंडीशन लेडीज होती हैं वो हमको फिर स्लट शेमिंग करती हैं बिकॉज वी डोंट कवर. So I dress very modestly, but I will not cover my hair. I mean, even whatever little I've read of, I don't consider myself a scholar of Islam, but जो भी थोड़ा मैंने समझा है, the Prophet was never all about that. The message is not all about that. And there are many authors working on it. There's so much research and revisionism going on in the Muslim world. Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt leads in that. Mustafa Iqbal is somebody I really read, and I believe that his message should go on, Islam and liberty. But Indian Muslims के लिए they are still under the hold of, I would say, a narrative. एक certain narrative कि तुम लोग persecute हो, कि partition, तुम लोगों का fault नहीं था. एंड अभी भी जो हिंदू मेजोरिटी है या हिंदू गवर्नमेंट है वो तुम्हारा नहीं सोचेगी. सो दिस इज समथिंग यूज्ड. This is what politicians do. They want to keep that 700 million Muslims. There's always this Damocles sword over them. If you don't rebel, if you don't oppose each and every new law which is coming, the Hindus will eventually, So ये है. This is what reform is always there. Reform is we are still fighting for triple talaq was a battle. UCC is going to be a war. And if you see what is happening globally, female genital mutilation, honor killings, Muslims are rising up and talking about these regressive practices in Islam. Reform is only for regressive practices. Jaise, we need women imams too. And of course, there are gays and lesbians too, LGBT community. You have to accept them. You will have to accept them in the 21st century. And there are gay imams as well, which might be news for some Muslims. So it has to change like every other religion. It has to evolve. Desert conditions of the 6th century do not apply to 21st century Hindustan. They don't. So things will have to change. Things are changing, and women are standing up and realizing the mullahs don't control the narrative. Mullahs shouldn't be controlling anything. It's up to us. The text is there. We read the text. We decide, and we take the interpretation. And we set the laws for ourselves. If we feel the Sharia laws are, restricting us or really unjustified, we have this practice of ijtihad. I mean, sit down and have the women on the council as well. And then, my personal favorite is the heretic traditions of Islam. Teach that too. Why would you keep it away hidden from us? There have been heretic traditions. There have been scholars and all who have criticized the text, who have criticized the life of the Prophet, who have criticized certain decisions of the rightly guided caliphs. And they had caliph patronage. So why not do that again? The Mutazilite movement, bring it back. And Islam will become something really great. Otherwise, what will happen if you keep this rigidity, if you keep killing every person who is questioning Islam, you will drive away people in droves from there. They might lead dual lives. They might show that they're Muslims. They might go to the mosque and keep the roza and everything. But then inside, it'll be duality. And you wouldn't want that. wouldn't wonder.
You talked about Hamid Dalwai. Tell our listeners and viewers who Hamid Dalwai was and what exactly happened to Hamid Dalwai.
I have tremendous respect for that man, and for me to describe him would be like, a guru ka ye, I can't. But Muslim Politics in India is his book. I wish it is mass circulated. I wish it is taught in schools and colleges. This is one man who had a very clear cut understanding of India, of the Hindus, of the Muslims, of Kashmir, amazing views about Kashmir, and the Indian secular society should do more to bring him in the forefront. And in the 70s, he took a stand against triple talaq, and he's perfectly described what you call Muslim obscurantism. I saw this recent interview about the ex VP Mr. Hamid Ansari with this anchor, and he's questioning him about the book, the very book that Mr. Ansari has written, and he's picking up lines from him. And Mr. Ansari's answers were typical, that meandering thing which we call Muslim obscurantism. So Hamid Alwai picked it up in the 70s, and he said, "Ki this will not work if Muslims keep doing this, because otherwise, the Hindus are going to catch up eventually, and then you won't be able to do anything." And it's come true. Now the Hindu extremists are copying the Muslim extremists. About there used to be no banning of books or movies, and then suddenly we see this ban karna hai, wo karna hai, ye karna hai. This was only in radical Islam. It was never in the Hindus. The Hindus were very tolerant. But then I guess after years and years of seeing your religion being mocked all the time, your gods and goddesses being mocked all the time, and at the same time Charlie Hebdo happening, and the Muslims getting away with it, it's bound to create some sort of a pushback.
Where do you see Indian Muslims 5 years or 10 years from now? Where do you see Hindu-Muslim relationship in, say, another decade or so?
I can't predict, but I'm an optimistic person because I feel the advent of technology and social media has made tremendous changes in the Muslim world. I mean, people are reading. There's an underground network, of course, it won't happen openly, but people are reading Richard Dawkins, people are reading Christopher Hitchens in the Middle East. The works are being translated. The Quran is being translated into various regional languages. It's not the what you call the Baap ki Jagir of the mullahs. It's just like Martin Luther, the German monk translating the Bible in vernacular German. So that's what's happening. Amazing revolution happening, amazing, and it's wonderful to see all these countries going towards a more pluralistic and tolerant Islam, which should have been there, which should have been the path of Islam. Eventually, I hope that the Hindus recognize this battle in Islam, this crisis in Islam, and what the reformists are doing. Because, see, 700 million Muslims, you can't nuke them. At the same time, majority Hindus, you can't push them into the sea. You have to coexist. And like I said, the best kind of Islam is preserved in India. आज भी दरगाह पे हिंदूज जाते हैं मन्नत मांगने के लिए, बच्चों के लिए थ्रेड बांधते हैं, वो अभी भी जारी है. Nothing has ever broken that, not even the partition. In Kashmir, the Kashmiri Pandits going to Shah Hamdan and my family, मेरे लिए भी दुआ करना, that is still there. It's still there. It's never gone. And hopefully, optimistically, we have a fight ahead, the Muslims, but I hope the Hindu majority recognizes this. I really hope, because it's exhausting to keep proving your loyalty to the country. I understand the resentment of centuries. I understand the Hindu awakening and everything. Like, please, we have a deadly battle going on. Me just questioning my religion makes me wajibul qatl, right? And if you keep now then pressurizing me to prove the loyalty to my country, I'll have a battle on two fronts, and I don't want that. So the Hindu majority can be understanding. It can be understanding, and I believe that because of social media and the awareness, and eventually these new millennial Muslims who are questioning their theology and who were not like their parents to keep it to the mullah. They're actually going into those jurisprudence areas and making changes. I mean, there are all sorts of Muslims, lapsed Muslims, cultural Muslims, agnostic Muslims, ex-Muslims, and believers too. They recognize the bigotry that had been happening, and they know that it has to be live and let live. It has to be that.
Thank you.
Thank you.